Okay, so this is the definitive course on how to use Claude Cowork if you're in sales. A lot of sales reps and sales teams are using Claude Cowork to maximize their productivity by being able to cover more accounts, reach out to more prospects, and identify which one of their existing customers are ready to upsell and buy more from them. Now, this course is super beginner friendly. A lot of sales reps, their only experience with AI is really chatting through ChatGPT or Claude on the website, really using it as a glorified search engine to ask questions whenever they come up throughout the day. But the goal of this course is to show you how you can use an agent like Claude Cowork to autonomously complete tasks on your behalf so that you can spend your day focusing on building relationships with your customers and closing bigger deals faster. Now, a couple of housekeeping things. I've packaged all the workflows that I showed throughout this course into a Claude Sales plugin that you can find in the description below. All you have to do is download this plugin, and then you can import it or upload it to your Claude instance, and then you can start running these exact same workflows for your business. Now, this course is broken up into 7 different videos. I do recommend watching these videos sequentially, and after you're done with watching all these videos, I really want this course to be a reference material for you, so at any point if you do get stuck, you can always just go back to whatever video would be the most helpful to help debug whatever issue you're running into. Now, last thing, if you do enjoy this course, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. I post weekly about how you can use AI to really scale sales and your revenue function. So if you like that kind of content, follow me here on YouTube. Also, if you have any video ideas or any questions, please put them in the comments below. It'll be super helpful for me. But outside that, enjoy the course and let me know what you think. So this is video number 1 of a free mini course I'm putting together on how to leverage Claude Cowork as your own personal AI assistant. Now, this mini course is designed for sales reps that are looking to leverage AI to be able to close more customers and generate more predictable revenue. So in today's video, I'm going to walk you through exactly how to set up the Claude desktop app correctly and the 4 different modes that Claude offers and when and how to use them so you can start building out your own AI assistant from day 1 correctly. Now, before we dive into today's video, quick intro to me. My name is Sanjay Ravichandran. I've been in tech go-to-market for over 8 years now, where I've closed deals at some of the largest companies in the world. And currently I'm focused on building AccuSales, which is a go-to-market engineering firm, which is specializing in helping software companies and specifically revenue teams within software companies be able to leverage AI to be able to really scale their revenue function, be able to generate more predictable pipeline and close more customers. Now, if you're interested in learning how you can use AI to be able to generate more pipeline, close customers, and also renew and expand them, I post about AI on this channel weekly, so follow me here on YouTube. Okay, so first things first, we're going to download the Claude desktop application. You can come to claude.com/download, and then here you can download it if you're using Mac, and then here you can download it if you're using Windows. It's really important that we download the Claude desktop app because most people are using Claude through the website chat, which is great for, like quick questions or being able to search a vast amount of information. But the challenge with only having Claude through the website is that Claude doesn't have access to any of the files locally saved on your computer. And so if you get the desktop application and use something like Claude Cowork, this is where Claude can actually do real work for you, like updating slides, updating spreadsheets or Word documents, because it has access to those files that are saved on your computer. So it's really important that you download the Claude desktop app and then authenticate. Now, I'm not going to download this because I already have it on my desktop. So I'm going to pull it up in another window and then we'll start actually diving into setting this up. All right, so now that you've downloaded the Claude desktop app, let's actually get it set up. So I've got Claude pulled up on my desktop. So I'm going to walk you through the first couple settings that I recommend implementing to make sure that you can start customizing Claude so you get much better outputs and you get to have a way better experience using Claude. So the first thing I recommend doing is if you go to the bottom left on your name, if you click on it, you can go into the settings. There are a ton of settings here, and I'm sure there's better videos and resources on the internet on how to customize Claude to just be, the perfect employee for you. But there's a few settings that I recommend setting up from day 1 that I feel like will help improve the output of whatever task you give to Claude. So the first thing I do is go to the Claude Cowork tab here. If you click into it, there's 2 things that I want you guys to enable and work on. The first one is dispatch. So dispatch is a feature from Claude that allows you to basically give Claude tasks from the Claude mobile application that it can work on your laptop if you're away from your desk. So I like to use this whenever, if I'm on a walk with my dog and my boss calls me asking me for some information, you can actually hit up the Claude mobile app and type it and send it a dispatch task. And Claude can go into Salesforce or Slack or any sort of file on your laptop and be able to pull information to be able to answer questions. Or if you're like, hey, I want you to review this transcript from this meeting I just had because I need to go get some air. Can you take this transcript and generate a follow-up email while I go for a walk? You can use dispatch on the mobile app to be able to do that. So recommend turning this on. I think this is going to really change, especially if you're a sales rep that's on the go, to be able to continue to do work while you're away from your desk. The second thing on this tab is the global instructions. This is really important to set up, in my opinion, because this allows you to dictate the output that Claude is going to give you, as well as the context that it has on what your goals are for a task. So the reason this is important is, let's say you are a sales rep and your quota is $1 million a year, and if you put that in the global instructions, well, Claude knows that, hey, you have this $1 million quota. How are you tracking against it? If you give a context in the global instructions on these are the buyer personas you're targeting, it knows in every single conversation or task you give it that these are your macro goals that you're trying to solve. So it makes sure that the output is aligned to those macro goals. So for my global instructions, since I'm trying to grow AccuSales as a go-to-market firm, I've given Claude the role of being an expert, CEO and board member with experience at multiple software companies, and I've given it a task of giving me, highly technical, actionable advice for me to reach my business objectives of MRR, obtaining customers, improving net dollar retention, and giving some context on the company and any instructions. Anchor every recommendation to those 4 metrics. So Claude is a really great partner to be able to think through ideas, and it's important for you to provide a lot of context. So I would start at the global instructions level, so it has that context going into any task or conversation. Now, once you're done in this Cowork tab, the next tab we're going to go into is the capabilities one. And here there's a couple settings I recommend enabling. These top 2, which are search and reference chats, and then generate memory from chat history, I would recommend enabling both of them, because this will allow Claude to be able to reference previous chats or tasks that it's completed in the past and pull that context into maybe a new task or chat that you've opened. This is important because let's say you're working on a deal and you have your first discovery meeting on week 1, and then you don't talk to that customer for 3 weeks, and then you want to prepare for that meeting that's coming up. Well, Claude can actually go and pull the context from that first meeting in week 1 and be able to pull that context so that you're walking into that meeting a couple weeks later with as much information and as strong of an opinion as possible. So it's important to be able to allow Claude to be able to reference those previous chats and search through that history. The second thing is, if you do generate memory, this is continuing to customize Claude in a way so it understands what you're focused on, so it can give you the right output based on your overarching goals. So I recommend having these up. If you are moving from like Gemini or ChatGPT or any other AI provider, you can actually import the memory from those other AI providers and bring it into Claude. So you just paste this, you copy and paste this prompt into those different AI models, and then you can paste the output here. And that's a good way to start building memory versus kind of having to build it from scratch. So those are the main ones on this one. And then the last thing is, if this is not enabled already, make sure artifacts, AI-powered artifacts, and inline visualizations are there. Artifacts are really important because when you have Claude focused on doing an actual task, so let's say you have had 5 meetings with a customer, and you're like, okay, take all of these 5 meeting recordings and give me a proposal. You need to have artifacts enabled so Claude can look through those files and then actually generate a PowerPoint presentation or a Word document, and that is an artifact that you need to be able to actually get from the output of Claude's work. So make sure these are all there. These are great because you can actually visualize and see the artifacts in the chat window itself. So make sure these are enabled so that you actually get an output, like an actual artifact from from Claude's work. Now, the last thing I recommend setting up is go to the General tab here. A couple things that I've used quite frequently. First one is a voice shortcut. So I'm starting to move away from just typing on Claude to starting to dictate. So being able to do speech to text. So I've got the caps lock key, so I press it and I just kind of brain dump into Claude, and that's my initial prompt. So I recommend, if you haven't tried this, try this out. And then the other 2 things are keep your computer awake. So if you do run like routine tasks, so I have a lot of people on our sales team that have like a daily brief that comes in, or they have a daily like email check, or a couple times a day Claude will go and look through their inbox to figure out if there's new emails for them to reply to. You need to be able to have your computer awake, because if your computer is locked or asleep, then Claude won't be able to actually execute commands on your computer to be able to go look at your calendar, your Gmail, or your CRM. So keep computer awake. Last thing is enable computer use. This is something that I am a huge fan of because Claude, it basically can do a lot of the knowledge work on your computer if it's very like kind of routine. So a good kind of use case here is if you are in sales and you need to connect with prospects on LinkedIn, it's not a very highly ambiguous or, you know, very difficult task to connect with someone or send a connection request. So what computer use does is it allows Claude to have access to your Google Chrome browser. So if you give it a list of 20 people you want to connect with on LinkedIn, it'll actually go take a screenshot of the LinkedIn page and then hit the connection request button and then be able to actually do the work. So the way to think about computer use is Claude can use and do whatever you would be able to do on a desktop or a web page. Claude can do the exact same thing. So I recommend enabling this because I think this is kind of where AI, especially these kind of Cowork, kind of AI agent harnesses are heading towards, is being able to actually do work and control a desktop the same way we would. So have computer use on. I think it's going to be super helpful for you as you go through your sales workflows. All right, now that you've started to customize Claude to your liking, let's talk about the 4 different modes within the Claude desktop app that you're probably going to use day in, day out. I'm going to talk way more in depth about all these modes in the later videos of this mini course, but I do want to touch on what they are right now and then how and when to use them, so that when we do dive into them deeper in actual workflows in the later videos, it's a lot more, you already have the foundational knowledge. So the first one I want to talk about is Claude Chat. This is the one that people are most familiar with. This is what people are using already on, the website, the Claude website. So I usually use the Claude Chat window whenever I have a quick question or a point in time question. So an example would be if I'm on a meeting with a prospect and they, throw a technical term that I'm not familiar with, or they, bring up a competitor that I'm not familiar with. I usually come into the Claude Chat window and then start asking questions about it. So for this, one thing I would recommend doing is I would recommend making sure that you're using the smaller models. So for everyday tasks, I usually use the Sonnet model for all like my chat conversations. So Sonnet with Medium has proven to be really good for me, both from a usage and response time perspective. So I might ask a question like, what is a GPU? And then, let's say I didn't know what that was. I might just put it in the chat window, and then Claude would use its training data or search the internet to be able to give me a response. So this is the chat window. This is what I think most people who have ever interacted with AI are very familiar and comfortable with. Now let's actually dive into what is Claude Cowork. So in order to switch between the different Claude modes, up here you can go between chat, Claude Cowork, and then Claude Code is right here. So Claude Cowork is actually where I spend the bulk of my time on the Claude desktop application. So here I would recommend using the kind of frontier model, so Opus 4.8, because you really want Claude to be able to do deep, high quality work for you. And so here, whenever you're using Claude Cowork, the thing that I like to always think about is chat is being able to go to a coworker and ask them a question. But Claude Cowork is if you went to a coworker and actually asked them to do a task for you. So that's the mental model to have. So if you just want a response to a question, go to chat. If you want an actual work done, go to Claude Cowork or even Claude Code if you want code to be generated. So here I can come in and say, I want a 1-page PDF on what a GPU is. And so what Claude is going to be able to do is take this prompt. It'll probably ask me a couple questions, but it's actually going through some skill files that I have. It's going to use tools on how to actually construct a PDF, and it's going to go through this entire workflow end to end, and it's going to output a PDF for me that I can store on my desktop, that I can use in sales presentations or even internal enablement. So let's actually see this go through the workflow and see what it outputs. So here's the PDF that Claude created. So it's a 1-page PDF like we asked on what is a GPU. If you actually come up here, we can actually save it off to our Google Drive. We can open it up on our desktop to see it in preview. But this is Claude actually taking a prompt and then actually giving us an artifact. So this is why it's important for us to have that artifact setting enabled within our settings pane. So this is for when you need a coworker to be able to do a task for you. That's the mental model that I want to give you guys. Is chat is you go and ask someone a question and you get a response and that's done. Claude Cowork is when you go to a coworker and actually give them a task and they need to give you or deliver something to you. Now the third mode is Claude Code. Now we're not going to dive super deep into Claude Code in this mini course because I want this course to be focused primarily on knowledge work that is outside of code generation and software engineering and AI engineering. This is primarily, or Claude Code is primarily for people that want to generate code and build applications or build AI agents. The one thing that I will say though is if you are in sales or marketing, Claude Code is actually really great if you want to be able to do things like motion graphics or animate your slides or presentations. So something that I've been doing for my YouTube videos is I'll use Claude Design, or I'll create some static images and I'll feed them into Claude Code and use some libraries like hyperframes to be able to actually animate it. So it gives a little bit of uniqueness and liveliness to presentations and some graphics. So that's a very common use case, but mainly the people that are using Claude Code are engineers and people that are actually building agents or software applications. So the fourth and final mode that you're probably going to be using in the Claude desktop app is going to be something called projects. So how you come to your projects are you go to the chat mode, and then here if you click into projects, you'll see all the projects you have saved, and then you can click into them to start working on a project workflow. Now the way to think about projects is if you have a workflow that you do that is extremely structured and it's very sequential, projects are a great way to be able to save how you want Claude to actually go through and execute that workflow. So for example, I have a AccuSales case study generator. I know exactly the type of tone, what I want Claude to generate, and how I want it to structure the case study as well. So I can give Claude those instructions right here so that it is able to take an input that I give it, and then it follows my writing standards, it follows my output format, and then it gives me a PDF version, a blog post version, and all of this. So this is really great is if you have a very common workflow that you might run on a weekly basis that you're like, hey, this doesn't change a whole lot, and I know what I need to input into Claude, or input into whatever that workflow is. So for example, for this case study one, I had 2 testimonials that came from interviews that I did with clients. And so I took the raw transcripts of that and uploaded it into Claude, and then gave it instructions on what to output. And it went through that workflow exactly, the same 2 times to create 2 different case studies. This is really great if you know what you want, like the workflow is very gated and very sequential. You can save it in a project so you don't have to keep repeating yourself every time you need to execute the workflow within Claude. Okay, so this concludes video 1 on how to download and set up Claude correctly. Now in video 2, we're gonna dive into how to connect Claude to some of the tools that you use day in, day out. So your CRM, your Gmail, your calendar, all the things that you need to be able to use to be a very efficient sales rep. How do we give Claude access to those tools so it can be your sales co-pilot and really help drive and make you way more efficient? So I'll see you guys in video 2. Okay, so this is video 2 of my mini course on how to use Claude Cowork for sales reps who are interested in leveraging Claude to be able to generate more pipeline and close more customers. So in today's video, I'm going to walk through exactly how you can connect Claude to all the different sales tools that you're using week in and week out. Now, the reason this is important is Claude is only as useful as the data you provide it. And so while Claude and Anthropic has trained Claude on all the data in the internet, it does not have access to data that's private to you at your company. So data that's sitting in your Gmail, data that's sitting in your CRM, you need to be able to give Claude access to that data in a very secure way so it can execute tasks using that data exactly like any other colleague or coworker at your company would. All right, so we're back in the Claude desktop app. Let's start connecting Claude to some of the sales tools that I'm using week in and week out. So if you go to the Customize tab on the far left and click into Customize, you'll see at the top of the screen, Skills, Connectors, and then Personal Plugins. Skills we'll dive into deeper in a later video. Connectors are what I mean when we actually need to connect Claude in a secure way to some of the tools that we have access to or use day in and day out. However, if this is your first time leveraging Claude and Claude Cowork, I would start at the personal plugins as a good starting point. And the difference between skills, connectors, and plugins are skills and connectors bundled together and then thematically grouped based on the different functions within a company. So if we go into the sales plugin here, you'll see the different skills that Anthropic has already created that they feel are super valuable for a sales rep. So things like account research, call summary, competitive intelligence, pipeline review, all these different skills are very relevant for someone that would be in the sales role. And then here are the different connectors that Claude has created or Anthropic has created that they feel like are super relevant if you're in the sales function. So being able to connect to Slack, HubSpot, I've got Clay already connected, I've got Notion, I've got Google Calendar and Gmail. So if you actually come up here, you can enable this plugin. And then from there, all these skills will be available to you throughout your Claude conversations and your Claude Cowork tasks. And then you have to go in and actually authenticate these different connectors. So for this one, I'll actually show how we can connect to HubSpot. So HubSpot is, I have like a test CRM here. So I'm going to hit connect, and then it's going to pull up a browser window on my Google Chrome. So I'm going to sign into my HubSpot account, sign into Google. So I'm just going to go through the authentication process here. It's going to send me a code on my email. Let's see. It's a pretty straightforward process. And then I'm just going to give it access to this information and then hit connect app. And then once I've done this, this should populate here. So I'm going to open up Claude again. And then, okay, so now we've connected to HubSpot. So if we actually go back to connectors, you can see that HubSpot is there. And I can go back and say, in my chat, I can say, contacts do I have in HubSpot? And so what you'll see here is Claude is going to go and actually use the HubSpot tool because it's connected to HubSpot to be able to actually search what's in the CRM to be able to answer the questions. I've got 796 contacts in my HubSpot CRM. So that is a very quick way to be able to connect something like HubSpot for Claude Cowork. If you want to connect a tool that's not part of the plugins, what you have to do is you have to go back to this connectors tab and within customize. And then here there's a plus icon. And if you click into it, you can hit browse connectors. And here are all the official connectors from Anthropic. And then there's also the ability to add a custom connector if you have or your team has created a custom MCP server for a tool that might be homegrown or not officially supported. But typically, this browse connector is an official directory, has all the major ones that you'd want to use. So for example, like I've got Canva connected, you can connect Slack or Google Drive. And this will really allow you to be able to kind of chain these different technologies together. Okay, so now that you've enabled a few plugins, you've connected Claude to some of the tools that you use day in, day out, and you also have some skills to be able to automate common workflows, let's actually bring this all together so you can see it in action. So a very common sales use case is preparing for an intro call with a prospect. So being able to research that company, build an hour understanding slide or a presentation so you walk in with a strong opinion on why they should buy from you. And then also being able to send like a pre-meeting email to confirm an agenda or even make sure the time still works for that prospect. So how that would look like is within Claude Cowork, I would use the call prep skill. So using /call prep, I would say I need help preparing for a sales meeting with Kleinbot, which is an agentic coding startup. Create our understanding slide in Canva. This is a single slide on our research of Klein. And then draft a email in my Gmail inbox that I can send to Klein asking if the time for the meeting still works and if they have specific outcomes they want to cover during the meeting. So this is a very common kind of sales workflow as you prepare for discovery calls. So I'm going to kick this off. What Claude is probably going to do is ask me a few clarifying questions to make sure it knows exactly what it wants from, or I want it to output. But it's going to use the different tools that we connected. So it's actually going to be able to deliver the work in Canva, and it's also going to deliver the draft in our inbox as well. So it says, I'm just going to put draft with placeholders. What's the goal of this meeting? Discovery first call. And then let's see Claude in action and see what it outputs. All right, so Claude just finished working. So let's actually go through Claude's workflow and what it delivered to us. So initially it started by going and doing research on Klein as part of the call prep skill. So went through these websites, built context on Klein as a company, as well as their go-to-market strategy. After it did that, then it looked to make sure that it had access to Canva and the Gmail connectors that we connected Claude to. Then it went through, actually looked if I had a meeting with Klein on my calendar. So it actually looked at my Google Calendar. Then it pulled the AccuSales brand kits from our Canva account. There was no meeting coming up with client anyway. And then it actually generated a few candidate slides within Canva that could be a potential our understanding slide. And then from there, it used the Gmail connector to generate a draft email. And so here are the actual deliverables. So if you actually click in here, it's going to pull up a link to Canva. And so let's actually switch over to Google Chrome to see what it gave us. So here's the actual slide that Claude gave on Klein. This is okay. It's, I think, a good first draft. What I was expecting from the Our Understanding slide was more of the information from the research and the call prep skill versus just almost like a title slide. So I think my next prompt to Claude is going to be, take the information from the call prep skill and all the research you did online and actually populate this with potential challenges client might be having, as well as some information on how AccuSales could potentially help. And then from there, it also generated a Gmail draft. So let's actually go into Gmail. Let's go to Graphs. And then here is the draft that it generated. So it's a placeholder draft, but it says, hi name, looking forward to connecting. Wanted to confirm if that time still works on your end. To make the most of it, is there anything that you'd be wanting to walk through? Even a sentence might help. Bottom of the funnel, what's biggest bottlenecks? This is a pretty good, I would say, kind of pre-meeting email. To confirm the meeting, as well as to make sure that I know as I prep for that meeting, what's the information I need to gather. So I think the next step for me coming out of this would be to continue to prompt Claude so the Our Understanding slide looks really good. And then I'd probably make a few tweaks to this email and then ship it to anyone at Klein. Now, what I would recommend for you to do next is take an inventory of all the tools that you use every single day. So things like your CRM, Gmail, calendar, things that are very low-hanging fruit that you can actually connect Claude to. So Claude has access to that data, and you'll see a huge improvement in your productivity and your workflows as you execute them week in and week out. So start there, and then once you have those kind of low-hanging fruit, tools connected, then you can focus on some of the other tools that you might use, once or twice a week. So things like Lead IQ, Clay, or Apollo, where you might be preparing for prospecting for the week, and you want to pull enrichment or contact data from those different databases. You might want to connect those as kind of the next tier of tools you want to connect. And the third tier would be if you have any sort of finance or legal systems that you want to connect Claude to. So things like Ironclad, if you're looking at contracts, to be able to see what contracts are, like if any have been sent, if you want to add any comments to NDAs or MSAs or order forms. That would be, I would say, like the third and final tier of tools that you would want to connect Claude to. But I think if you start with your CRM, your calendar, and your Gmail, you'll cover a lot of the use cases that are kind of boring admin work. And then from there, you can start adding and connecting other tools. So this concludes video 2 of our mini course on how to use Claude Cowork for sales. In video 1, we focused a lot on settings and customizing Claude to your liking. In video 2, we talked about how to connect Claude to all the different tools you use every single day, so Claude can use data from those tools to be able to execute tasks like any other coworker at your company. The next set of videos are actually going to be the bulk of this course, where we actually look at all the different workflows that a sales rep has to do and how we can augment them using AI. So things like, how do we automate our prospecting? How do we prepare for meetings? How do we negotiate deals? And how do we also do pipeline reviews and look at the overall health of our business? All of those workflows can be augmented and automated using like Claude Cowork. And let's dive into how we're actually going to do that using Claude. Okay, this is part 3 of the mini course, how to use Claude Cowork for sales. In today's video, we're going to go through exactly how you can use Claude Cowork in order to do prospecting for your sales campaigns. Now, before we dive into today's video, quick intro to me. My name is Sanjay Ravichandran. I've been in tech go-to-market for over 8 years now, selling to some of the largest brands in the world. And right now I'm focused on building AccuSales, which is a go-to-market engineering firm, helping companies and sales teams within companies adopt AI to be able to really generate more pipeline and close more customers. So if you like that kind of content, follow me here on YouTube. All right, let's dive into the 3 workflows we're going to go through today. I like to break up prospecting into 3 different stages. The first one is territory planning. So if you've been in sales, like your company's probably going to give you a list of accounts either quarterly or once a year. So it's important to understand which one of those companies you actually want to spend the bulk of your time in to try to break into, because you feel like they are the ideal customer for your product or service. So Claude is really good for territory planning and territory mapping. The second workflow we'll go through is company research and mapping the buying committee. So once you've kind of figured out where to spend your time, if you want to go after, company A, for example, it's really great to use Claude to understand why that company would want to buy your product or service, and then who within that company would actually care to solve for the pains their product or service solves for. So that's a really great use case for Claude as well, which we'll dive into today. And third and finally, we'll dive into, now that you've figured out which companies to spend your time on and who to reach out to within that company, how do we actually build messaging so we break through the noise and get that first discovery meeting with that organization? So we'll dive into all three of these workflows in today's video. Okay, so let's start by doing some territory mapping. So I'm in the Claude Cowork UI right now. One of the main things that I want to share is whenever you are using Claude Cowork, I highly recommend that you create your own folder on your computer. So Claude only outputs the files that it creates into that particular folder, so you're not looking throughout your computer on where the heck did Claude put this file. So always create and mount that folder to whatever work you're doing within Claude Cowork. Now, if you're working at a bigger company, there's a very high chance that you already have an ICP criteria. So you can just take whatever file that's stored in, or if it's in a Google Doc, and you can upload it and mount it here or put it in this folder for Claude to use. If you don't, and you're at a startup where the ICP is constantly changing, what I'd recommend doing is maybe taking a list of 50 companies and actually manually tiering them. And then from there, put that into Claude and then have Claude derive that ICP criteria. So this is what I actually did for this video. So I took a list of 108 companies, I manually tiered them and did my research on what would be a tier 1 account versus tier 2 and 3, and what accounts we should disqualify. And Claude derived that these are the 5 data points that I was using to come up with this criteria. And once you have this ICP criteria, what I would recommend doing is, rather than just having it as a Claude Cowork chat window, I would recommend saving it as a project. The reason is account tiering and territory mapping is a workflow that most sales reps don't do quite frequently. They might do it once a quarter, or if you get accounts yearly, you might do it once every 6 months. And it's a workflow that's very sequential. So this is a great use case for using projects within the Cowork application. And so here I took the criteria that Claude derived and I put it as the instructions for this project. So I just copy and pasted this. And then from here, what we can do is actually upload a new set of companies for Claude to review and then come up with a criteria, or tier those accounts. So here I'm going to go add files, and then I'm going to have this file that I created with a bunch of test companies. And I'm going to ask Claude to tier these organizations based on the instructions provided. So I'm going to kick off this workflow, and Claude's going to read the instructions and the project instructions, look at this file, and then start executing this workflow. So I'm going to let it run for a minute, and let's see what Claude outputs. All right, so Claude just finished working and tiered all 8 companies that we shared with it. What I did before this video is I actually manually went through and tiered all these companies using Google, LinkedIn, and Crunchbase. And so let's compare what Claude gave us versus what I did manually. So Claude's tier 1 accounts are on the right. So everything Claude outputted is on the right. So Auth, Zed, and Klein are tier 1, which I also called as tier 1. Tier 2 are FOSA and Truffle Security, which I also have as tier 2. I'm disqualifying ChainGuard and PostHog. And then I am also having Flamingo and Subimage as tier 3. So what this workflow actually did is I took a list of accounts that I manually tiered. I had Claude derive an ICP qualification criteria. We saved that into a project, and then I gave it a list of companies, and it manually derived at 100% accuracy rate the same tiers for the same companies that I did manually. Now, these 8 companies were not part of the initial 108 list. So it's very cool to see that, using Claude, we can automate a ton of territory mapping and account tiering based on a qualification criteria that we share with Claude. All right, so now that we tiered our accounts, let's do the second workflow, which is actually figuring out why this company should buy from us and who within that company should buy from us. So what I've done is I've taken the tiered account list, I've put it into our folder that we've been using as our working folder for this course. Now, we use projects for the first workflow because it's a very infrequent workflow. Account tiering is not something that you do on a weekly basis or across different conversations. And so it's really great if you're doing a very sequential workflow to have it in a project. For deep outbound research, this is something that you might do more frequently, and you maybe want to be able to do it across different conversations. And so what I like to do for this particular workflow is actually package it into a skill file. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start and actually invoke this skill. We talked about skills in our previous video, but while I have this workflow running, we'll actually kind of unpack what a skill is and then how this skill works in particular. So I'm going to say I want you to run the outbound full. So the slash command actually lets Claude use that particular skill to research the tier 1 accounts in the folder attached. So I'm going to kick this off, and I'm sure Claude's going to ask me a couple clarifying questions. So let's see what it asks me first, and then from there, let's go into the skill file itself so we can see what Claude is doing under the hood and the instructions that I provided it. Okay, cool. So it did find the tier 1's accounts, which was AuthZ and Klein, and it's going to ask me a couple questions. So let's see what Claude asks. It said, yep, run for both, and then outbound outreach messaging for the economic buyer and champion for each account. How many contacts? Let's do 2 per account. And then let's see, I think Claude should start executing this workflow. Okay, cool, so it's running the skill. So while this is going in the background, let's go and actually look at this skill file. So in order to find skills, we have to go to Customize right here. And then here we have our plugins, connectors, and skills. So if we click into skills, we go into outbound full. What this is doing is this is generating an HTML web page that is doing deep research on every single company that goes through this skill workflow. So while our account tiering was really to find very firmographic information to figure out if the account is worth reaching out to, what this skill is doing is a little bit more in depth, where it's actually going through and doing a pre-flight check to figure out if we've reached out to this company in the past, going through finding out the business model, the buyer type, what the paid products are, and then most importantly, if we go down here, is it maps out the, where is this? Okay, buyer readiness, and then it maps out the service. So it actually goes through the company's go-to-market strategy and then maps out what pain points in their go-to-market strategy parts of my service would help solve. So this is a lot more in depth than what we did with our ICP qualification criteria. And so this is a skill that I run quite frequently. And what is it doing? Okay, so Claude is actually asking if we can run 2 agents in parallel to be able to research both companies in parallel. So it's going to multitask as it researches both and builds out this HTML report. So let's let Claude run this for a sec and see what it outputs. Okay, so our Claude agents just finished. It took about 15 minutes for them to go through this workflow. Let's take a look at what they outputted. So here is for AuthZ, section 1, pre-flight checks. It's going through the ICP screen, which we already did in the past. It passed the ICP screen. Gives a brief on the company and what they do. They're selling. They have an OSS to paid model. Here's the funding information, how many employees they have, the pricing tiers, any customers that they might be using, GitHub stars. This is all useful information for me. And then the most important thing is not ICP qualification, but pain to AccuSales service mapping. So being able to map what pains they might be experiencing when it comes to go-to-market based on some of the firmographic information that we have on them, and mapping exactly what AccuSales capability would help them solve that pain. And here's the do nothing if they don't solve this. So some buying readiness, actually reconstructing what their go-to-market motion could look like. So based on this is a lot more in depth than what we did in the account tiering exercise, where we were just looking at high-level information to be able to flag yes or no for whether or not to go after this account. And then here it also calls out, key contacts. This is the actual sources on where we found the contacts, or some, quotes from this person. Here's our potential champion target, which would be head of revenue when they join the company. And then here's some initial outbound or outreach messaging for a cold call script, emails. Is there LinkedIn as well? Yeah, LinkedIn as well. And then same for Greg. So this is for AuthZ. This is really good. And then if we go to Klein, it's going through, what is this information? Oh, gotcha. Okay, interesting. So it's actually saying here's a verification gate. Looks like there's a lot of people from Klein that went to OpenAI. So double check if the company is operational, even though we did the account tiering exercise. So it has the exact same kind of flow, with section 1 being the disqualification gate, company brief, account classification, ICP qualification. Wherever it says validated, it just means that it's actually has a source that it can cite. And then inferred is just based on all the other information it has and making an educated guess. And then back to pain to AccuSales service mapping. So enterprise demand is 100% inbound and founder improvised. So how can we actually make this more repeatable and not just bottlenecked by a founder? buying readiness, go-to-market reconstruction, where AccuSales fits in, and then key contacts. Now that we have this high-level, account research report built together, what we can do next is actually change some of this information and actually start creating emails and reaching out to these people. So what I like to do from here is, for example, if I say, can you use Clay? So Clay is a tool that allows you to be able to research companies as well as to find contact information. There's others out there like LeadIQ or Apollo, but I can ask, can you use Clay to find the email address for Saud Rizwan so I can reach out to him? So what we can do now is, now that we've had this outbound full skill run and create this report with a bunch of research, now we can use some of the other tools that we've connected to Claude to actually go and find contact information within these companies. So I don't want to burn through a bunch of credits doing this, so I'm just going to have to pick one. But in theory, what you could do is say, based on these reports, what are all the contacts within Klein and AuthZ that we can reach out to? So using the Clay tool, we found Saud Rizwan, and then here is his email. And then from here, it's giving me his LinkedIn, his email, and his name. And then now we can reach out to him. So now in this single chat, what we've been able to do is actually do deep account research on 2 companies that we've already tiered. And then now we've pulled contact information from the key contacts within these organizations that are going to be our economic buyer and our champion targets. So now that we have the people, why they should buy from us, the next step is to actually build a email and outbound sequence, both on email, LinkedIn, and cold calls, so we can actually break through the noise and get that discovery meeting. All right, now for our third and final workflow. Now that we've researched a company, found the people we need to reach out to, let's actually build out messaging on how we're going to reach out to them. So I'm going to use Saud Rizwan, the founder of Klein, and I'm going to give Claude another skill for it to use in order to create messaging based on my brand guidelines and the tone of the outbound messages that I want to create. So I'm going to say, I want to reach out to this prospect. Use the Klein HTML report in the folder and his LinkedIn profile to build email and LinkedIn messages for me to land a discovery meeting. For the email messages, create a 4 email sequence using the cold email skill. For LinkedIn, create 3 LinkedIn messages using the LinkedIn prospecting skill. So what we're actually showing in this workflow is we're taking the output from all the workflows that we've done so far, and we're giving Claude access to go look at this guy's LinkedIn profile, as well as use the report that we generated from our previous chat, and then use 2 skills together to create a end-to-end sequence with 4 emails and then 3 LinkedIn messages. So I'm going to kick this off and let's see what Claude generates for us. All right, so Claude just finished writing messaging specifically for Klein. And so if we actually click into what it output, it did some more research compared to what we just did. It's giving us a 4-touch cold email sequence with subject line and what hook, and with the call to action being, can we run a sales audit for Klein? And so it's giving us what day to run these emails, as well as what the email subject and body would be. And then here it's giving us our 3-touch LinkedIn sequence. Now that we have all of this is really great because you can run this for multiple people at the same time. It doesn't have to be specifically for one individual. So for example, if you had a list of 50 people, you might want to just have this tiered to where it's 1 email sequence per account. But you can slice and dice this however way you want to see fit. If you're going after much bigger organizations, you could say, hey, for this company, all the software engineers, I want to generate a 4 email sequence just for the software engineers, write it out, and then you can just mass blast those emails to all the software engineers that you enrich. But since we're going after the CEO, we can actually build a very highly customized message for that individual person. Now the next step we can actually do is we can use our HubSpot connector to actually create this contact within HubSpot and then move this messaging into HubSpot. So for example, we can say, can you create a contact for Saud Rizwan in HubSpot and create email tasks with the emails and LinkedIn tasks with the LinkedIn messages that you just created. So now what we can do is, now that we've created all of this in Claude, we can actually push this back to our systems, which are going to be HubSpot. So we can actually create this contact in HubSpot and then push all these emails. So it's not just sitting in a doc on your computer somewhere and you have to manually copy and paste it. We can actually have Claude push this into HubSpot. So let's let Claude run through this. Oh, okay, cool. It's working through it now. It's creating a contact object within HubSpot for client and the CEO, and then it's also creating 7 tasks associated with this. So let's actually go into HubSpot and see what Claude created. So now within HubSpot, I can go up here and look up, so its name, and this contact has been created from Claude. And then here we can actually see these are the emails that Claude is using. So it's using the HubSpot connector for Claude, so you can actually see that it's getting pushed from the Claude desktop app. And it's giving us the sequence that it created, and it's giving us due dates, so it's aligned to exactly how we want to structure our cadence. Now you can use this for other outreach tools if you're using something like Outreach or SalesLoft or Lemlist to be able to push these contacts in there and then help it create the sequence itself from the messages. So it's a really great way to have Claude as your home base to be able to execute and move the messaging from Claude into any sequence you might have already created. So yeah, here it's going to go through, here's the actual connection message itself. And then here is the different LinkedIn messages. So here's like email 2, for example. Here's the subject line, and then here's the actual body of the email that you can start leveraging. And then here's one for the first email that we're going to send out. So it's very cool to be able to have Claude connected to all your different sales tools, so you can actually create a contact, write messages for the contact, and then push those messages and then create a sequence, all from just a single conversation within Claude. Okay, so this concludes video 3 of our mini course on how to use Claude for sales. In this video, we talked about how to use Claude Cowork specifically for prospecting and the 3 different stages of prospecting. We talked about how to use Claude for territory planning, how to use Claude for deep account research and finding the right buying committee within those accounts, and then how to use Claude to write your email and outbound messaging sequences. So in video 3, we dove into prospecting. In the next video, in video 4, we're going to dive into, now that you've done the prospecting and you actually landed that first discovery call, how can we use Claude to be able to prepare for that meeting so you knock it out of the park and maximize all the meetings that get booked on your calendar. So I'll see you guys in video 4 on how to use Claude to maximize your sales meetings. All right, so this is video 4 on the mini course, how to use Claude Cowork for sales. Now in video 3, we talked about how to use Claude Cowork to automate your prospecting so you can start reaching out to more companies and start landing discovery meetings. In video 4, we're going to dive into, now that you've landed that first discovery call, how can you use Claude Cowork to prepare for that discovery meeting so you maximize the time you have with every single prospect. So coming out of today's video, you'll have a clear understanding of how you can use Claude to not only prepare for sales meetings, but also after the sales meeting is done, how you can use Claude to do all the follow-up activities. Now, before we dive into today's video, quick intro to me. My name is Sanjay Ravichandran. I'm the founder of AccuSales. We're a go-to-market engineering firm helping sales teams leverage AI to be able to generate more pipeline and then close more deals. So if you like this kind of content on how you can use AI to really scale sales at your company, follow me here on YouTube. All right, so we're back in Claude Cowork. Now, whenever I'm preparing for a discovery call, there's a couple key data points I always want to make sure I have. The first thing that I want to build is I want to build an our understanding slide, because it's really hard to ask discovery questions on a discovery call when a prospect doesn't feel like you understand their business and what they're trying to do. So what I like to do is I like to know information about the person I'm meeting, what does their business do, and then what is their current go-to-market motion, so I can form an opinion on why they would want to use my service. So what we should do is, from video 3, we did a ton of research on Klein and AuthZ. So let's pretend like we got a meeting with Klein, with Saud. And in our previous lesson, we talked about how the outbound full scale generated this extremely detailed HTML report, which has a ton of context on the business and their go-to-market motion. So 2 of the 3 bullet points we're already able to capture in the prospecting itself. Now, if you're doing more scaled outreach where you're not going this in-depth into each individual account, you might want to run a skill like this just so you get this kind of content. But it's really important that we understand the business and exactly what pains, needs, or goals that our product or service will solve for that business. Now, the one thing that is missing is for us to do research on the person we're actually meeting. So what I like to do is copy the name of the person. So I can say, I just landed a meeting with Klein. I'm meeting this person. Can you research blogs, podcasts, and videos on how he's thinking about Klein's growth and GTM strategy? Now, the reason this is important is I obviously am trying to position go-to-market, consulting services, go-to-market engineering services. So I'm more interested in the story behind Klein, and how they're planning on growing and their strategy. And then actually, if we go back to this chat, there was the link to his LinkedIn, I believe. Let's see. Oh, here it is. So we can copy the LinkedIn link here that we got from Clay, and then we can say here is his LinkedIn. Also say use computer use to research him. Now, computer use is a tool where Claude gets to spin up its own browser and be able to use a computer like we would. So I'm going to spin this and kick this off so that we can start researching and get that third data point. Now, the reason we want to do this is before we give Claude the ability to create any sort of presentations or slides, we want to consolidate and get all the information first before we start beautifying it and putting it on a slide and making it look pretty. So first we want to do the information aggregation, and then we'll start putting it on a slide. So how do you want to research this? Let's do meeting research brief. Okay, so I'm going to let this run, and then let's see what Claude outputs. Okay, so Claude just finished working, and it gave us a really in-depth meeting brief specifically for the CEO of Klein. It talks about who he is, what Klein does, which is a little bit more redundant since we already have that information, and then his core go-to-market thesis. And then at the very bottom, it actually shows all the different sources that it aggregated in order to generate this brief. So there's some interesting things here, like some smart questions to ask him on how he's sourcing enterprise deals, who the economic buyers are, and some landmines to also avoid. This is probably what my follow-up question would have been to Claude anyways, like give me some discovery questions. So let's actually try this. Give me 5 discovery questions on the 3 whys and to qualify quantify pains, needs, and goals. So the 3 whys are essentially why anything, why they would want to buy something, or like what are they trying to solve for? Why us? So why would they want to use your product or service? And then why now? Like obviously they're in business. Why would they want to make a change now? So those 3 whys, there's ways to massage the questions, and then we want to figure out if we can qualify and quantify the pain associated with those 3 whys, specifically on the why anything and the why now. So I'm going to let this run and see if we can get, okay, nice. It's actually generating it pretty quickly. So here's some discovery questions as well that Claude is giving us that we could ask and maybe even keep in the speaker's notes as we think about building out our first call deck. Yes. Add these to the brief. Now the reason I want to do this is I want Claude to just have everything on one artifact so that we can upload this artifact in our next portion to actually build out the slide deck. So what we've done so far is we have information on the person that we're going to meet with, like a very solid brief. And then from last video, running the outbound full skill, we generated that HTML report on the business and their go-to-market strategy. So we have a clear understanding of who we're meeting, what the business does, and then what the business does in order to generate revenue so that we can form a strong opinion on why they should buy from us. So I'm going to let this update the brief, and then we'll dive into Claude Design, which is kind of the fundamental technology that I'm using to actually generate these updated slide decks for my first call meetings. All right, so Claude just updated the meeting brief with the 5 discovery questions. Now the person brief and the company brief are also in the exact same folder that we created at the start of this course for tracking all the assets that Claude creates for us. Next, what we're going to do is go into Claude Design, which is right here, which is going to aggregate that information and beautify it and be able to generate a really high quality first call deck. So let's click into Claude Design, and then I'm going to shift my screen over there so we can start looking at how. But you click this button and then it's going to pop up a different window to start actually generating these slides. All right, so now we're in Claude Design. Claude Design is a relatively new feature, but it's been my home base for actually generating these first call decks. So a couple things I recommend doing when you first start using Claude Design. If you come down here to Design Systems, what you can do is you can give Claude access to all your logos any sort of assets that you might have as a company, and it'll actually design a very thorough design system so that you can have a higher quality and more consistent output with whatever slides or design assets that you're creating using Claude Design. So a couple of things I uploaded here were the AccuSales blue and black like logos, color palettes. And then I also uploaded the 2 logos, both for light and dark backgrounds. And then I gave it some context on the company. And then Claude actually went through this process and designed this really thorough design document that you can reference in future conversations and work that you do in Claude Design. So if we go back to projects, up here, you can choose your design system. So I'm going to use the AccuSales design system. From here, what I would recommend doing next is go to Files, Attach Folder, and then use the folder that you've been using as your working folder so that whenever Claude does upload or output any slides, it gets saved in that folder. So make sure you're mounting the proper folder. And then from here, what I like to do is come in and then hit templates. And since we're building slides, I want to give Claude a few reference slides that you can use in order to generate the highest quality output from the information that we've aggregated from all the research. So we can go to browse, and then I'm going to go pick a couple example slide decks. So this is some slides that I created in the past through Canva that I'm going to let Claude reference. And then I'm going to give it another one for a conversation that I had in the past. So those are some examples. This is called few shot prompting. We're giving Claude a couple examples of what a good slide deck looks like. And so what I'm going to do next, finally, is we're going to go back in here. We're going to go to the slide deck, the folder that we were in. And then we're going to also attach both of the files that we generated through our research, both on the person as well as on the company. So the task I'm going to give to Claude is, I'm going to put this, I'm going to say, I'm preparing for a meeting with Klein and their CEO. I've attached 2 assets to this. One is a company brief on the background of the company and their go-to-market strategy. The second asset is a meeting brief on how their CEO is thinking about their GTM strategy. So I want to make sure Claude is referencing the right files and using it for the right task. So use this information to create an hour understanding slide for a discovery call. I've attached 2 PDFs that show examples of an hour understanding slide. And the information to include. Okay, so before we send this off, let's make sure we have the right information. So we've got 2 example templates of slide decks. We've got the information from the meeting brief. We've got the HTML report on the company. We're working in the right folder. We have the design system, and then we're also using the highest tier model. So I'm gonna kick this off, and then sometimes Claude might have a few questions. 2 files could not be attached. Okay, which files could not be attached? There might be a couple of these that might. Okay, so it looks like it got the Klein documents attached, but it did not attach the PDF. So let's see what the issue there is. Let me see if I can just do it again and if this will work. Maybe I'm just giving it way too much information at the same time. Oh, gotcha. It's way too large of a file. Okay. So what I'm going to do is while this is working, I'm going to go back to Canva and actually pull a smaller version of that where it's basically the slide deck is like 22 slides. So maybe it's a bit overkill to have that much information there. So what I'll do is I'll go to Canva and actually just consolidate it to the single slide that we need so that it knows, so that the file is just smaller. So let me do that really quick while this is running. And then download this. Okay, cool. So I have a smaller slide that I can use. And let's see, where is it in my, okay, here it is. Now that should work. here is an example of an our understanding slide. Information to include. Okay, here's some clarifying questions from Claude. The example PDF load. I'll reattach the example PDFs. What structure feels right for the slides? Application. Start with the person and their responsibilities. Then current state, situation, this, and implication of not doing anything. Responsibilities. Okay, well, I tried. And then future state goals. Okay, how should I direct the framing? There it is, and then customer facing, shown live, and then however, use the AccuSales brand, but include the Klein logo in the presentation. Okay, so I'm gonna do this. So I'm gonna answer those questions, and I'm also gonna ship this off as well. So the Claude has way more information on how to generate this. So this usually takes a couple minutes. So let's let Claude run for a bit and then see what it outputs. All right, so this is what Claude just gave us. It took about 3 minutes for this to go end to end. So it's relatively faster than I was expecting it. I think we gave it enough context for it to know directionally what to build. But it does have a couple things that I probably want to amend. Up here, it actually gives us some 2 notes on the Klein logo. So while this was running, I did go and get the logo for Klein. So let's just drop that in there and see what it looks like. Looks okay. You know, not super great. I wish it was a transparent logo, but I think that's more on me finding the right one. I'm not a big fan of this SR thing, and I don't really know why there's dates here. So we can actually come up to edits, and then I think we can actually just get rid of this, right? Okay, cool. And then we can get rid of this. Okay. Save edits. And then I want to get rid of this. Let's see. Actually, let me get rid of that. I'm going to take a screenshot so I know exactly what I need. Okay, so I'm going to say get rid of this SR icon. And then, yeah, we need to also get rid of this bottom part right here. I don't know why we're saying discovery call plus notes. So save this. And then here, I'm also going to move, oh, god dang it, make this a little bit smaller. This is supposed to be a footer, not the main attraction. So let's try to make that small. Okay, cool. All right, that looks a little better. And okay, cool. And we also remove this. All right, this is actually a very strong our understanding slide. And then here you can also come and edit the speaker's notes. So when you do export this, there's speaker's notes here. What we can do next is we can come up here to share, export, and then when you go to export, we can actually export this as a Google slide. So Google Slides is like a very common format that a lot of people are using for presenting slides. You can also just have this or even take a screenshot of this and then put it on a Google slide as well. But we can download this, and this would actually be the slide that we would present to the customer or the prospect to be able to do discovery, understand what's important to them. So now that we have this, we are ready to walk into that first sales meeting with a strong understanding of why this company should buy from us, and use this slide as a tool for discovery to be able to ask questions to better formulate our opinion. And so I'm gonna hit cancel here. So what we're gonna do next is we're going to pretend that we had the discovery call, and how can we use the meeting transcript and the meeting recording to be able to update this slide with the information that we were able to gather through discovery. So what I'm going to do is, I actually shouldn't have exited out of that. I should have saved that to the folder that we've been working on. We're gonna go back to Claude, and then go through a workflow of, now that we've had a discovery call, how can we use Claude to be able to do all the follow-up items that come with running a discovery meeting. All right, so now we're back in Claude Cowork. So the scenario here is we just presented our beautiful slide to the prospect. We had a great discovery conversation. We found out a ton of pains that we solved for. So the next thing that we're going to work on is we're going to take the transcript of that meeting recording, give it to Claude, as well as the Our Understanding slide that we created in Claude Design, and have it update the slides based on the new information that we actually gathered from the prospect. This is a very common workflow, which is kind of post-call updating the internal notes and updating the Our Understanding slide. And the reason we update the Our Understanding slide is that if we have a follow-up conversation or a demo, we can show the updated slide, tell the prospect like, hey, we were listening to that conversation that we just had, and then use that updated slide to do further discovery in case we didn't ask a question or missed some discovery questions in the first meeting. So this is why we want to continually use the transcripts to be able to update the slides, using Claude as a way to not have to go manually watch every single meeting that we have. So what I did is I downloaded the slide deck as a PowerPoint presentation. I put it in the working folder that we already have. And then here I also created a transcript. This is synthetic data that I generated on, if we did run a discovery call, here's a synthetic data of the transcript. It's a markdown file. What I do in actual real life practice is I use the Google Meet integrated recorder. So it creates a Google Doc every time I have a meeting, and then I download that Google Doc as a markdown file and I feed it into Claude. I recommend Markdown or HTML. I think Claude and these LLMs are just much, they're able to read Markdown files, and HTML is better because they have a lot of hierarchy in the information. So I recommend downloading as a Markdown. You can upload it as a file here. And I'm also going to give it the PowerPoint presentation from Claude Design. I'm going to give it the task of, I just had a sales meeting with Klein. I've attached the transcript and the Our Understanding. Use the transcript to update the Our Understanding slide. And then using the transcript, I want you to draft a follow-up email. The email will recap the meeting, what was discussed. Actually, let's not talk about that. And schedule next steps. Okay, so I'm going to kick this off, and then the goal here is that Claude is going to obviously review the transcript, figure out, based on the hypothesis that we walked in the discovery call, what is valid and what isn't. So it's going to take out information and hopefully update it with the information that we captured, asking our great discovery questions. All right, let's take a look at what Claude gave us. So Claude went through this process. It looked at some of the key updates in the transcript, and it updated the slide based on those key updates. So it talked about drowning in inbound. It did update quite a few of the goals as well. And then here, the main thing that it didn't work on was the implication of not changing from status quo and how that would impact the goals. So pretty cool that it updated mainly this. All of this stuff is actually pretty similar except for this portion, which is about the team growing from 20 to 100. So in this process, this would actually take me 30 minutes pre-Claude, pre-LLM days, because I'd actually have to watch the recordings end to end to make sure that I'm not missing anything. I still watch a lot of my sales meetings just because I'm curious about the questions I'm asking. And there's certain nuances with tonality and things like that that you miss by just downloading a transcript. But this does a lot of the admin work and automates a lot of the admin work. So in about a minute and a half or so, we were able to update our understanding slide with the transcript of the meeting. Now let's take a look at this follow-up email. For some reason it gave it, I guess I didn't specify the output, so it gave us a markdown file. And then it gives us a extremely long email. I would probably cut about 60% of this. Yeah, that's an extremely verbose email. But what I'm gonna say is, can you rewrite the email to be 200 words long and push as a draft in my Gmail inbox? Don't have the contact information loaded. Subject line is IQ Sales follow-up. So what I usually like to do is if it gives me a first draft email that I'm not super sold on, I'll just have it push it to the Gmail and then I'll do the final edits before sending out. And this is just a personal touch. Whenever I'm writing an email, I never load the contact information. That's the last thing I do before I send out an email, mainly because I've sent a lot of bad emails because I accidentally put the person's name in and accidentally hit send. I wait now until I finish writing everything before hitting send, before putting the person's email address. So now it's going to draft the email, and then it said, okay, so now the draft is saved. So what we've done so far is updated the our understanding slide. We have our follow-up email drafted sitting in our inbox to do final touches before sending out. The last thing that we need to do whenever we wrap up a sales meeting is update our CRM that this meeting did in fact occur, and then upload all notes and a brief description of what was discussed in that meeting description. So the next thing that we can tell Claude is now that we've had it attached to HubSpot, it's attached to our calendar and Gmail, we can say, I want you to update Saud Rizwan. I'll make sure I'm spelling his name right, on HubSpot or in HubSpot. Log a discovery call, discovery meeting, because I think it's denoted as meetings at HubSpot. Log a discovery meeting and create a summary of the transcript as the notes for the discovery meeting. So what we can do now is we have the transcript, we'll have Claude create a summary of the transcript, and then we'll have it create a meeting in HubSpot so that we don't have to go in there manually. So Claude is really starting to become our home base. And as a sales rep that's been doing this for almost a decade now, updating the CRM is probably my least favorite activity. And so this is something that is huge for me. So what is this saying? Object type. Oh, there's just the proposed changes. Yes, approved. So it's asking me exactly what to put in there. And then here's the actual object type. So let's have it run through this and then we'll go into Gmail and HubSpot to see if it actually worked. But yeah, let's give Claude maybe a couple seconds to go through and create this object. All right, so now let's take a look at the record that Claude updated in HubSpot. So let me open this up in HubSpot. So we are in the Saud Rizwan meeting. Okay, and here is what it created. It said, it was completed at this date. And here are the notes that it summarized based on the transcript. So I know this video is probably going to be a bit longer, but what we were able to accomplish in video 3 and video 4 is actually pretty astonishing, because in reality, like when you're like preparing for prospecting, that would take about a half day to do. And we can now do this with multiple sub agents and cover a ton of accounts in a matter of 10 to 15 minutes. And then here, what we were able to do is we were actually able to take a meeting and prepare for that meeting using some templates and design systems that we built, prepare for that meeting in about 5 to 10 minutes, have the meeting, and then in about 5 to 10 minutes after that meeting, update the slides based on the meeting transcript, update the CRM, and then we also have let's see if I can pull this up on my end. And then we also have an email sitting in our inbox that is drafted that we could send out to whoever that we just met with. So we were able to just go kind of end to end from prep to meeting follow-up in a matter of 20 minutes end to end. So this is the power of Claude once we start building some of these automations within Claude and specifically Claude Cowork. All right, guys, so that wraps up video 4 on the mini course, How to Use Claude Cowork for Sales. Now, I've been in tech go-to-market for over 8 years, and this is very near and dear to me because this kind of admin work used to be some of the most mind-numbing parts of the job. We're preparing for sales meetings, going deep into job listings, Googling a bunch of information, looking at 10Ks. Now I can use Claude to just aggregate a ton of that information. And then also sitting in Google Slides and building some of these presentations, I can use Claude Design to take that aggregated information and then create really powerful, really sleek presentations. So I can walk into any discovery call feeling super confident. And then after that discovery call is done and I ask my great questions, I can use Claude to do all the mind-numbing admin work of updating the CRM, drafting the follow-up emails. And then I still do listen to a lot of the recordings because I want to understand if I'm asking good questions. So I still do that. But what I'm not doing is listen to those recordings just to understand what the prospect is saying. Claude is amazing when it comes to really automating a ton of the follow-up work that comes after you have your sales meetings. Now in video 5, what we're going to discuss is how you can use Claude Cowork to actually integrate with your existing marketing campaigns. So a lot of sales teams, what they struggle with is they have their marketing team running events, webinars, and generating a ton of inbound action, but they don't have the ability to be able to generate their own sequences to be able to follow up with those inbound leads or even drive demand to those events. So we'll walk through how you can use Claude Cowork to be able to generate sequences specifically for events, promotions that you might be running. And then once those promotions or events finish, how you can generate sequences to follow up with those leads. So I'll see you guys in video 5 on how to use Claude Cowork to maximize your marketing efforts. All right, this is video 5 on how to use Claude Cowork for sales. Now in videos 1 and 2, we talked about how to set up Claude Cowork and make sure it's connected to your tech stack. In videos 3 and 4, we talked about how to automate your prospecting using Claude Cowork, and then how to prepare and knock any of your sales meetings out of the park using Claude. Now in video 5, we're going to cover a very common workflow for sales teams, which is taking assets that your marketing team provides and using Claude Cowork to use those assets both for prospecting as well as lead follow-up to generate meetings and pipeline. So we're going to go through 2 workflows. The first one is your marketing team is scheduling a webinar or some sort of event. How can you use the collateral around that event in order to generate outbound messaging that you can personalize at scale to your prospects so you can drive attendance and demand for those events. The second workflow is how can you take a list of leads that have either done things like signing up for an ebook or interacting with your website or attending one of your events. How can you take a lead list that have done all these different activities, opted into different lead magnets, and automate highly personalized follow-up messaging to all of those leads using something like Claude. All right, so let's start by setting up the scenario for our first workflow. So a lot of marketing teams will put together webinars or even do physical events, but they won't generate the content or even some of the copy for their sales teams to be able to drive some demand or attendance to these events. So a lot of times a marketing team will put together this amazing landing page in order for people to register for a webinar or an event, but then they go to the sales team in order to write some of the emails to actually get their accounts or their prospects to actually attend these events. So a very common use case for me personally is to take the landing page or any sort of meeting or event brief that the marketing team has put together and take that and create outbound messaging highly customized for a specific company. And so what I'll show you is, I created this pseudo event that we'll walk through, which is a pipeline summit, physical event. There's a pseudo agenda as well as speakers that will be attending. But the goal is we can actually feed the copy from this web page or this landing page into Claude and have Claude generate the first pass of a sequence so the sales rep doesn't have to do it and they can just focus on finding the right people within their accounts to send these messages to. So now that we have an understanding of the scenario, let's go into Claude and start building out this messaging. All right, so now we're in Claude, so let's actually start building out this outbound sequence. So the first thing we're going to do is actually call the cold email skill. Now, if you haven't built out a cold email skill, this will be in one of the future videos on how to actually build out these skills and package your very common workflows. But what we're going to do here is we're going to say use the cold email skill to generate 4 outbound emails to drive attendance and registration to this event. So we're going to do this, and then I have the event as an HTML page. Ask clarifying questions if you aren't sure what to generate. Output. The tone should be professional and concise. So we're going to use the cold email skill to generate 4 outbound emails. We're asking Claude if it has any clarifying questions on what we expect it to output. And then lastly, we're going to give the tone that it should go. And then we're going to kick this off. And we've given it context on the event itself through the HTML page. So now Claude is going to go review the landing page and then review the skill and then actually start creating these emails. So let's give it a second to see what it outputs and see if we need to have any additional prompts in order to steer Claude to give us the proper email sequence. Now, while Claude is working, I did want to shift gears and actually walk through the cold email skill. As I mentioned, all of these assets I will link in the description below so you can use these skills for your own workflows and just customize them to your business. But the key things and why I'm using this skill is, one, it's going through and reading an ICP document and a brand guideline document. So I don't have to specify to Claude that, I want to go after these types of companies, or this is the types of companies I'm going after and the people within those organizations. The second thing is it goes over the writing principles that Claude is going to follow as it generates the sequence, and it's going to go over voice and tone. But primarily when it comes to writing, I'm interested in the structure of the overall sequence, and this is the structure of the email. So it's talking about an observation of the prospect, a problem, proof, like a customer story, and then an ask. Has guidelines on how to write subject lines, and then for sequences specifically, how the follow-up messages should all look like, so that there's never a checking in type email, but there's actually like each email has a different hook to why they should respond to us. So I did want to show this, and then the last thing in the skill file is actually some gold standard emails that I have written myself that have generated meetings and like meaningful opportunities for me. And so I gave Claude access to those emails so I can use it so it's writing in my tone and my style. So this is the skill, but if you don't have this built out, you would have to essentially prompt and kind of work Claude through and provide it this context. So it'll give you this kind of output. But in a future video, we'll talk about how to actually package this up to create your own skills. But this is why we're invoking this cold email skill to generate this. Okay, so Claude did complete writing out the email sequence. So we actually look at it. It generated this document file. It goes through the 3 emails, exactly kind of the cadence between each email. Gives us the subject line, the body, call to action, email 2, 3, and 4. And then from here, what we can actually do is, okay, this is the case study it used, and different personas, swap out the email subject lines. So it did give us a couple recommendations on how to actually like operationalize this. What we can do from now is we can say, okay, these emails look good. Can you create these email tasks for Klein in HubSpot? And so what you can do from here is if you have your sales outreach tool connected, so I'm using HubSpot right now, but let's say you had something like Lemlist, or if you had something like SalesLoft connected, you could theoretically push the emails that Claude just created as a outbound sequence as tasks in your outreach tool. So we'll walk through that, but the idea is that you want to take the emails that Claude is giving you, push them into your, if you're using Gmail, if you're using whatever tool to actually send the emails, and then you do your last mile QA there to make sure that these emails look good to send to a human being. So that's the recommended workflow, just from my experience, is have Claude write the emails, do some quality check in Claude if you want to, but that final thing before you hit send, use a Claude connector, make sure that tool is connected, and then send it directly to that tool. So right now it's using the HubSpot integration. It found the one prospect in Klein, which is the company that we've used throughout this. And then it just assigned these 4 email tasks to Klein. And I'm going to say yes, because it did ask for a quality check, a compliance check. And then once I approved it, now it's actually going to create this 4-step email sequence in HubSpot. So this is a really great way to take a marketing campaign, create an outbound sequence to generate demand for that campaign, and then once the messaging is there, push it to whatever platform you need to send those emails. So you can have kind of Claude as that interactive kind of connective tissue between all these different tools to generate the messaging to really, really automate a pretty manual workflow. Like one of the big things I never really liked was we would always have these like marketing events that our marketing team would put together, but it would always come to the sales rep to actually create the messaging to get your accounts to show up to these events. So it's a really great way to automate a ton of that work. Okay, so Claude just completed this, and I think we should be able to actually go into HubSpot. Let me actually pull up HubSpot on my screen and see. I'll need to authenticate into it. All right, so it took me a sec to authenticate into HubSpot, but here's the first email out of 4 that Claude created. It gave us a subject line options, and it gave us the body of the email, and then it assigned it to the right person within HubSpot. So now as a sales rep, all you have to do is do that final kind of last minute touches, and then you can ship this email out to try to get these people to attend your event. Okay, so we just saw the first workflow, which is how can we take our existing marketing campaigns and marketing assets and use Claude to automate a ton of outbound messaging so we can drive demand and drive attendance to all the events and webinars and assets that our marketing team creates. Now, I want to set the scenario up for our second workflow that we're going to walk through, which is now that you've had an event or you've put a lot of these assets out into the ecosystem and you have these leads coming in, how can we use Claude in order to take a list of leads that have all become qualified leads because they did different activities on your website? And how do we write highly personalized messaging based on what they did in order to become a lead. So for example, we want to have a different email get sent to someone who might have signed up for an ebook versus someone that, asked for a demo, or someone that viewed our pricing page gets a different email than someone who attended a meetup that we did at a coffee shop. So the goal here is we're going to give Claude a lead list of different leads, and we're going to have Claude write highly personalized follow-up emails and then push those emails to HubSpot so the sales rep can do that final check before sending it out. So for this scenario, I've created a dummy lead list with, I would say, the most common lead sources just from my experience. And we're going to give Claude the task of leveraging the cold email skill in order to write one highly personalized email based on what was the activity or action the lead did in order to become and enter our sales funnel. So the prompt I'm going to give it is use the cold email skill to generate a highly personalized follow-up email that references, actually, the highly personalized follow-up email based on the action the person did to become a lead source is in the attached CSV. Now this is a very common sales workflow that I did as a sales rep because I would go into the office every day and I would probably have like 5 to 10 leads, but they would all be at different points of their adoption and maturity with using our product. And so it's really important to make sure that the messaging meets the customer or the prospect where they are as far as their buying journey is concerned. So I'm going to kick this off, and let's give Claude a minute or so to review the list and then come back to us with what it outputted. Okay, so let's see what Claude outputted. So here's the person's name, the title, the action that they did to become a lead. This was already in the CSV file, so this isn't something that Claude went and found. But Claude did give us some subject line options and then the body of the email. And it did this for all 4. It did do some personalization at the top. It also did some personalization on their title as well. So it calls out VPs of sales, talks about demand gen for someone at the head of demand gen, and also talks about RevOps leaders for the director of RevOps. So it's not only personalizing based on what the person did in order to enter our sales funnel, but also personalizes it based on the role or the title that they gave, and also maybe some potential pain points that title would be responsible for within the company that they work at. So here, for example, demand gen usually gets responsible for the number, but only owns half the levers to drive revenue. This is the number here is revenue number. So this is really good. Now these leads are not in HubSpot today. So the next task that we can give Claude is create the contacts in HubSpot and create an email task for each of them based on email you created for them. So now we can take this CSV file of leads that we have, and we can now push them into our CRM or any sort of outreach system that we're using in order to then be able to quickly send out these emails. So once again, Claude is that connective tissue between not just sales and marketing, but between some of the different tools that we're using. So we could have used some sort of landing page software, capture these leads, brought them into Claude, wrote highly relevant messaging, and then pushed them to our CRM. Or vice versa, they could already be in our CRM and we can pull them from HubSpot, write this messaging, and then push the messaging back out to HubSpot if that's what we're going to use to send it, or we can use something like Salesloft or Lemlist in order to actually send the emails. So let's let Claude go for a minute, and then we'll see what it gave us within, I guess it actually finished. So let's see here. Oh, it's still working through it. So let's give it a minute, and then let's look at HubSpot once it's done. Okay, so Claude just finished creating the contacts and the email tasks in HubSpot. Now, we use the CSV file with these emails in order to write the messaging and then push the messages and the contacts into Claude. However, if you have a CRM already tied to your marketing campaigns and the leads get created in your CRM, you can still use the HubSpot connector or connect your CRM to Claude, pull the contacts and the lead source into Claude, have Claude write that personalized messaging, and then either push it back into HubSpot and have an email task, or you can push it into another tool, like even your Gmail account directly, in order to send those emails or send those messages. So Claude is really that connective tissue, and I've been using that phrase a lot, but it's really that connective tissue between your tools to come in, do some work, and then push it out to the next tool. So let's actually see what it gave us in HubSpot. So I'm going to switch over to HubSpot for a sec. So this is the lead that it created. And then from here is the task that it created. At the top, you can see it says HubSpot connector for Claude. So that's how we know that it did come from the work we just did. And it gave us the different subject line options, and it gave us the body of the email. So this is a really great way for you to take, and I know I did this across five people, but this is a great way if you have a lead list or a lead queue of 20, 25 people, you can have Claude work through that list, write highly personalized email based on that person's title, based on why they became or whatever action they did to become a lead. And then you can write very highly personalized follow-up emails and then actually push those emails to your outbound sequencing tool of choice so that you can kind of automate your inbound follow-up using Claude as a way to make sure the messaging is really sharp. So this is a great thing to do. This is something that I used to not like doing on a daily basis, where I would spend the first 5 to 10, or I would go over the first 5 to 10 leads in my queue, and it would be a ton of effort because it's really the first email you need to personalize, or that first message. And I never really enjoyed doing it. But with Claude, you can automate it and build this into a very strong workflow. All right, so that was video number 5 on how to use Claude Cowork for sales. In this video, we really talked about how you can take a lot of your marketing assets, like an event, for example, and use Claude in order to write highly personalized outbound messages to be able to drive demand for all the marketing assets your marketing team or yourself are putting together. The second scenario we talked about is, now that you are running these marketing campaigns and getting inbound leads, how can you write highly personalized follow-up messages to those inbound leads so they convert at a much higher rate, and then you can generate more qualified pipeline through your marketing efforts. Now in video 6, we're going to talk about how you can use Claude Cowork to understand the health of your business and to figure out which deals are the most likely to close and which deals have a ton of risk, and how you can mitigate that risk so they ultimately close in your favor. So I'll see you guys in video 6. All right, so this is video 6 on how to use Claude Cowork for sales. In this video, we're going to look at how you can use Claude to identify the health of your business, figure out what deals are going to close and what deals are at risk, and how you can mitigate that risk using Claude to coach you through those deals. Now, we're going to look at 2 workflows today. The first one is how we can use Claude in order to look at all the metrics that are sitting within our CRM to understand how well our sales process is performing. Since we have Claude already connected to our CRM, we're going to be able to aggregate all the meetings we've had, all the opportunities we've created, to understand what are the bottlenecks in our sales funnel and where we can optimize so that we can hit our revenue goals. The second workflow we'll walk through is how we can use Claude Cowork to identify which deals in our sales pipeline are at risk and how we can mitigate the risk. Claude is really great to be a sales coach, to understand exactly what gaps in our deals exist and how we can fill in those gaps. Also, all the skills files and workflows that I showed throughout this course will be available to you in the description below, so you can implement them in your own sales process. Now, before we dive into today's video, a quick intro to me. My name is Sanjay Ravichandran. I'm the founder of AccuSales. We're a go-to-market engineering firm helping sales teams adopt AI to really scale their revenue function, so generating more pipeline and closing more customers. So if you really like the idea of how AI is really impacting sales and go-to-market, follow me here on YouTube for more content. All right, so the first workflow I want to walk you all through is using Claude in order to get a snapshot of the health of your business. So something that's very common for sales leaders or sales reps to want to understand is how they're tracking with their leading indicators. So if you think about revenue and closed won business as a lagging indicator, the leading indicators are things like leads reached out to, meetings scheduled and meetings held, opportunities created, pipeline created. So it's really important for a sales rep to understand exactly how they're doing with the metrics that they can control and how they're tracking towards their leading indicators of success, so that revenue, which is a lagging indicator, is very predictable and they're on track to hit it. So a very common use case is really getting a snapshot of your business to make sure you're tracking well against your leading indicators. Claude is great at aggregating that data across multiple different sources that you give it access to. For this example, everything that I have is in HubSpot today. So we're going to have Claude go through HubSpot and pull metrics to understand how we're doing towards our Q2 pipeline and how it's going to lead into Q3, and if we're tracking to hit our Q3 number, because a lot of the pipeline that we create in Q2 will likely close in Q3. So if we come back to Claude here, if we go to customize, we'll see right here that we do have all these different tools connected, HubSpot being the main one for me. So as long as the tools that you have access to are connected to Claude, Claude will be able to query those tools to be able to pull information or metrics that might be relevant for this search. And so for me, since HubSpot is the main one, what I'm going to do is I already wrote this prompt out. So I'm going to copy and paste it here. But we're going to give Claude this task, which is to be able to analyze my Q2 2026 pipeline, break down in leads touch, meetings set, opportunities created, and closed won, and then give me the conversion rate of each of those different steps, as well as the close one revenue. And then what are the, and then give a summary on how we are tracking to hit our revenue goal for Q3. So we're going to kick this off, and then let's see what Claude starts with. It might ask a few clarifying questions because it might be wondering what my revenue goal for Q3 is, but it should understand that we're going to be pulling data from HubSpot, and then from there, ingest that data and analyze it. So let's give it a minute to work, and then from there, let's see what Claude gives us. Now, Claude just completed the bulk of its analysis. It did ask me two clarifying questions, one on my revenue target, as well as whether these deals were reoccurring or one-time retainers. I didn't want to show real deal information, so I do have some pseudo data in here, but my Q3 target was $50,000, and then I'm giving it the understanding that this is our annual ACV commit deals. And so from here, it's going through and then giving me an understanding of different scenarios and how we're tracking towards that. So let's wait for Claude to completely finish and see what it finally outputs. Now, one thing I didn't do in my initial prompt is actually give Claude guidance on how I want the output of this to be. I wanted it to be like an HTML static web page for me to be able to see both the Q2 funnel as well as my Q3 outlook. So that is something that I want to clarify, because right now Claude just gave its analysis in chat, but I actually wanted an artifact from this conversation. So always specify what output you want whenever you're interacting with Claude. That'll help you just be able to minimize the number of prompts you need to use. All right, so this is what Claude outputted. It talked about close one revenue, deals won, win rate, the average deal size, looked at number of leads touched, meetings set, gave us the conversion rate between all the different points of our funnel. So as a sales leader or sales rep, you can figure out exactly what you need to optimize for to make sure that you're hitting your revenue goals. It talks about conversion rate, deal economics, open pipeline entering into our next quarter, so forward looking, and then how we're looking at our Q3 outlook versus target. If our Q3 target is 50,000, how are we looking at actually beating that? And then it gives us a list of recommendations where it says actually 50,000 is a sandbag. These are all pseudo numbers, so I wouldn't anchor on the numbers itself, but really the goal of this is to show that you can take all the information across your different systems, pull them into Claude, have it aggregate that information, and then give you a report to be able to make decisions off of. This is stuff that used to be, you'd be kind of fiddling with Salesforce or fiddling in HubSpot to figure out, but Claude is great to be able to really aggregate a ton of information and give you kind of directionally what you should do in order to optimize your business or your sales process. Now, one other thing that I do want to show is now that we have this ready to go, what we can actually do is we can go to the Claude menu, and if we go to scheduled, we can actually create this as a reoccurring task. So we can come in here, we can set this up manually, we can give Claude the exact same directions that we gave it. So we can say something like, weekly sales metrics pull, and then we can say, summarize my sales pipeline to see how I'm tracking, something like that. And then we can even put the exact same prompt that we put initially. Obviously we'd want to change it to not look at just quarterly, but weekly, to say, analyze my, sales pipeline, and then break down on a trailing weekly basis. And so we can do this and set this up as a reoccurring task. And the reason we want to do this is whenever I've been a sales rep, a lot of organizations, whenever they're struggling with their sales process, they ask their sellers to be able to send reports either to their management or even to executive leadership to understand how the sales team is performing on a week-over-week basis, so that they can quickly triage if certain sellers aren't performing when it comes to generating pipeline, if we're getting demos but we're not getting POCs, or if we're getting late into the sales process with a lot of opportunities, but those opportunities late stage are not converting. Sales leaders and execs can know exactly where to optimize the sales process. So this is something that really helps you kind of automate that report by saying this. So you can save this off. And so every, we can say, every week, for example, like every, maybe Friday at 4 p.m. you want to run this report, and then you can send this off. And you can even have it to where you say, send this as We can say output a draft report and in PDF format, and draft an email to my CEO. You could even say it like this. So what Claude will do is every Friday at 4 p.m., it'll go into HubSpot, pull the information, generate a report as a PDF, and then draft an email that you can send internally. So this is a way that for us to be able to continually be able to quickly monitor the health of the business by using Claude to aggregate this information, generate recommendations, and then share those recommendations across the broader team. All right, now the second workflow I want to walk through is using Claude as a deal coach in order to look at your opportunities in your sales funnel and figure out what risks there are in the deals that you're actively working and how you can help mitigate those risks so you can drive them to becoming a customer of yours. So Claude is really good at this with coming up with new ideas and really being a kind of brainstorming partner. So what I'm going to show is if we go to customize and skills, I built this deal coach skill. Obviously you'll have access to this skill in the description below, so you can kind of customize this for your own process or your kind of coaching style. But the idea is that I've been working with sales leaders across my entire career, and I codified all of the expertise both from a process level, but also the nuance into this skill so that whenever I'm not sure, how this deal is going to progress, I can invoke the skill to really understand like, hey, what gaps are there? So if we go through this, this is supposed to provide very tactical advice. And the frameworks that I'm used to when it comes to qualifying deals are Command of the Message and MEDPIC. These are very popular in the software space. And so Claude is going to look at the deals and the information with those deals against these different frameworks and give me recommendations on, hey, you have, really good metrics for this deal, but you don't have a champion. Like go figure out who would be a target champion, and here's some strategies to build them up into a champion. So these are ways for us to use Claude to understand those risks and then use frameworks that we already know work to figure out how we can get ahead of these risks. So what we're going to do is, since we have HubSpot also connected and all the deal information lives in HubSpot, we can say something like this. I'm going to copy this back in here. We can say run deal coach on my Ridgeline software deal in HubSpot, pull the contacts and activity history and give me the full plan. And should I revive or kill it? Now you can just call the deal, you can just say run deal coach, or you can use the / command to actually invoke the skill. If we do this, there it is. And from here, we can run Claude and let's see what it starts with. So it's probably gonna think through this. It's gonna review this skill file. And then from there, it's gonna have to go and pull the deal information from HubSpot. So let's let it work for a sec and then see what its first questions are to us or what it's gonna output initially. All right, so Claude found the deal in HubSpot. So it's going through the CRM objects to pull all the information. This is a pseudo deal as well. But the idea is that any information that is available in your CRM, Claude should be able to pull all that activity history, all the notes that you put in order to understand the health of the deal. And here you can see Claude's thinking where it's saying that the email trail is a core story. Let me grab all the call and meeting notes as well to understand kind of the timeline and the process of the deal so far. All right, so let's look at Claude's diagnosis for this deal. It gave us a win probability of 10 to 15%. It looked at the entire timeline of the deal. So it looked at all the different activities that we had for this deal within HubSpot, any notes that we might have captured through the meetings, conversations, or emails. And from there, it built out a MEDPIC scorecard. In the past, I've had to MEDPIC a ton of deals in my career. This would always take so much time that I would only do this if the deal was above a certain ACV, usually in the 6 figures. But with something like Claude and being able to aggregate all this information from your CRM, you could MEDPIC every deal in your sales process, even if they're much smaller. But I think the big things to call out here are, at least for me, is one, no champion, pretty as friendly but not powerful. No pain is identified, which is big. And then really no access to power. And we have no idea about the decision criteria. So, it's really calling out the facts that there's a ton of risks in every single point of MEDPIC. And then from there, it gives us a little bit more kind of nuanced take on the risks itself. And then it gives us a recommendation on plays ordered by priority. So it says, go above Priya, understand, go straight to the VP, get in touch with power to understand that is this actually a priority worth solving? And it just goes over a couple other plays as well. And so this is a really great way to have Claude give you additional ideas on deals that you might be stuck with figuring out like, hey, is this deal real or not? Or like, how do I progress this deal forward? Claude is really good at taking a holistic view of the deal, aggregating that information. Now, one caveat is you never want to like take everything at face value, right? So these plays are good. I probably would do play one. I probably wouldn't necessarily do like a breakup email because I don't necessarily want to like push until this happens. I would rather get the breakup or a hard no from the VP before kind of breaking rapport with a target champion or a coach in this situation. So it's good to bounce ideas and get these ideas from Claude, but obviously use your intuition, use your nuance, and use your understanding of how the conversations are going before you execute on this. But here you can also see that Claude is talking about, review the account, kill the deal immediately if it's in forecast, and then it's asking if it wants to draft any email. So from here you could, in theory, just say like, draft an email to the EB and push it to my Gmail drafts. I'll review and put the email to send. So you could even say something like this. So this is connecting, information from HubSpot, getting these recommendations, and then you can use Claude to actually draft an email in your Gmail inbox and then send it out from there. So this is how you can kind of connect all these different tools together when it comes to figuring out how we can take these sales plays and then start executing on them using something like Claude. All right, cool. So now Claude drafted an email that I could send to the EB to start actually executing on those sales plays. Now the next thing, let's actually look at a healthy deal and how Claude would react to that. So here is another deal in the sales process that we can do. So say, now do the exact same thing for this deal, where Claude is going to analyze it against the framework that we provided to figure out like what sales plays can we execute on in order to get this deal to a closed won result. All right, so similarly, did the exact same deal diagnosis for this opportunity, gave us a win probability, went through the MedPick scorecard. And the reason Claude is doing this is we codified exactly what kind of output we want in the skill file deal coach, called it the top 3 risks, the plays, and then bottom line, what are some summaries? And then from here, it's asking, what should we do next? What we can actually do from here, which I think is really important once you connect Claude to all of your kind of internal tools, is you can say, share the top 3 risks of each of the 2 deals with Sanjay in the Acu Sales Slack channel. And so we can even say this. So, if you have Claude, connected to all these different tools, it can generate these recommendations, and you can actually say like, hey, I've connected you to Slack. Can you Slack Sanjay with the with this information as well? So it's a great way to kind of take information that you're building in Claude, getting recommendations, and then also using Slack or Gmail to be able to do outbound messaging in Gmail, and then use Slack for any sort of internal messaging from this as well. So we showed how you could use Gmail or Claude to write and draft a Gmail email. And now we can say, hey, here's a way for you to use the Slack connection with Claude to be able to send a message to someone in Slack. All right, so Claude just posted in Slack and tagged me. So let's view the message. If we click open link, let me show what Claude gave us. So now whenever you use the Slack connector, any sort of like messaging connector, it is going to be sending from your account. So it is sending from my Slack account and it's tagging me. And then it took the 3 risks at both of the deals and then put them in the Slack channel. So for both Ridgeline and for Vantage Signals. So this is a really good way to use Claude to look at the deals in HubSpot. Like if we look at this workflow end to end, we had Claude connected to HubSpot and we asked it to go look at a particular deal and look at it through our sales qualification process and score that deal, call out the risks, and then what plays we can do to help mitigate those risks. And then from there, with the sales plays, we could use the Gmail connector to start actually executing on Claude's recommendations by drafting messages that we could start sending to the EB. So that's a way to do all the outbound messaging with all the recommendations from Claude. And then we use the Slack connector to take those recommendations and risks and share it with our internal team. So you could send this to your CEO as a DM, you could send it to your sales leader so that your broader team is aware of the health of your deals and maybe how they could help drive them to a close. So this is a really great workflow to be able to pull information from all these different sources, get recommendations, and then also start executing on those recommendations or sharing them internally to other stakeholders. All right, so that concludes video 6 on how to use Claude Cowork for sales. Now, my key takeaways from this video are the fact that we've connected Claude to a bunch of tools to be able to do 2 very common workflows for any sales rep. The first one is being able to connect to your CRM or any sort of source of truth with all your metrics to understand and get a snapshot of the health of your business. The second workflow is being able to connect to your CRM or your outreach tool to be able to do things like deal reviews, where Claude can look at like all the history that you've had with a prospect or a company to understand what you need to do in order for that deal to close. And you can, switch out. I use MEDPIC and command of the message, but you can switch out based on whatever qualification framework you're very comfortable with to understand what deals are actually qualified and likely to close. And then we rounded out the video by showing how you can use the Gmail connector and the Slack connector to be able to send external and internal messages. So all the recommendations that Claude bubbles up from aggregating all this data, you can send an email to the EB at a company because that's the best sales play to get a deal done. Or if you want to update your boss on how a deal is progressing, you can also do that using the Slack connector. Now throughout this course, I've used various skills for very common workflows that I do day in and day out. And so in video 7, we're going to dive into how you can take your very common and routine workflows and codify them into skills that you can use day in and day out and also share with the rest of your team. So I'll see you guys in video 7 on how to turn your workflows into Claude skills. All right, so this is the 7th and final video for this course on how to use Claude Cowork for sales. Now in this video, we're going to talk about how you can take your most common sales workflows and package them up into skills files so you don't have to keep repeating yourself and you can get a much higher quality output from Claude. Now you've seen me throughout this course use skills to demo very specific workflows or use cases on how you can use Claude for sales. So first we're going to talk about what is a skill, and then from there we'll walk through creating one for a very common workflow for a lot of sales teams, which is account research. Now before diving into today's video, quick intro to me. My name is Sanjay Ravichandran. I've been in tech go-to-market for over 8 years. I'm currently the founder of AccuSales. We're a go-to-market engineering firm helping sales teams adopt AI to really scale their revenue function, so generating more pipeline and closing more business. So if you like the intersection of AI and sales and how AI is really impacting your ability to generate revenue, follow me here on YouTube for more content. Now, before we start building a skill together, let's talk about what a skill is and why you should use it. At a very high level, a skill is a set of instructions that you're giving to Claude on how to execute a workflow, and you've packaged those instructions into a bunch of files that are in a single folder called a skill folder. Now, the reason we use skills is first, you're going to get much higher quality, more predictable output from Claude because you're giving fixed set of instructions on how to execute that workflow, so you can get the same quality output every single time that Claude executes this skill. Second, you don't have to repeat yourself because all of the context for that workflow lives within the skill folder. So for example, if you're writing cold emails, you might have all of your gold standard emails as a file within the skill folder. So you don't have to constantly upload the last email that got you a meeting or the kind of emails that you want Claude to write. So you don't have to repeat yourself. And lastly, you can actually take the skill folder and share it across your team. So this is something that's very common if you're building like an account research skill or some sort of cold email or prospecting skill. If you want to keep the same brand voice, or if you want to make sure all the accounts across all your different sales reps are being tiered correctly, you can share that skill across your whole team so everyone is getting the same quality output whenever they use that skill. Now, let's actually look at what exactly makes up a skill. So at the heart of it is what is called a skill.md file. MD is a markdown file. And if you look at the anatomy of a markdown file, there's a couple things that are worth calling out. Don't go super deep into the technicalities here, but the top of this markdown file or the skill.md is called a YAML front matter. And there's really two key things here. The first is the name. So this is the actual name of the skill. So in this example, it's proposal drafter. So whenever you saw me in the previous videos do that / command and then write out the skill name, that is how you would invoke the skill if you wanted to force Claude to execute the workflow based on what's in the skill. So this is the name. Secondly, there is a description. So the description is what does the skill actually do? Now the description is very important because let's say, for example, you just type up a prompt and you don't specifically use the / command to make Claude use this skill. Claude will look at the description of all the skills that you have created to figure out, hey, for this workflow that you're asking me to do, should I use a skill to be able to generate the output? So for example, if I was trying to draft a proposal, I could do two things. I could either use the /proposal-drafter skill in order to use it, or when in my prompt, I could say, I'm creating a client proposal for AccuSales, here's some information. And because the word client and proposal are in the description, Claude will know to use the skill even if I didn't specifically call out the name using the / command. So that's why the name and description are very important. It tells Claude which skill to use even if you're not forcing it to use that skill. So those are the two main things. And then from here, this is the actual description of the skill. So this is where the actual instructions will live on, what to execute. And something to notice here is there's, this references / pricing tiers. So within the description, you can have specific reference files or other assets that Claude can reference in order to execute the skill. And we'll dive a bit deeper into that when we actually see it in action. But the idea is when Claude reaches for this skill, it's like, okay, I'm gonna need to write an email, but I don't know who the ICP I need to write the email to is. And that can be stored off in a reference file that Claude knows to access if it's time to write an email. So this is other files within this broader skill folder that Claude can access to make sure it's getting the highest quality output. So for example, if we scroll down here, this is the actual structure of the file. So the skill would be called, proposal drafter. At the top level, you have the skill.md file. You've got a couple reference files. Reference files are really additional information or knowledge on how to execute this workflow. And Claude only opens these reference files when it needs access to the information in them. And then any assets. So for example, whenever I'm doing something for marketing, any marketing skills I might have will have the AccuSales brand logo, the color palettes, so that any, images or proposals that are getting created are following our brand guidelines. So that's a very common asset. Scripts aren't super relevant for a lot of sales teams. The one time I do, scripts are essentially like snippets of code that you want Claude to run in order to execute the skill. Where I've used scripts is whenever I've had to use like the Apollo API or an API of one of the data providers that I'm using. Sometimes it's good to have Claude create some scripts in order to hit different API endpoints, to enrich email information, phone information, enrich accounts. You could create those scripts and then put that API scripts in the scripts folder. But this is a very high level of what is the skill, why use it, and then from here, I think now that we're speaking the common language of what a skill is, let's actually go into Claude Cowork and start building out our first skill, which is going to be how to create and do account research for your particular company and package that into a skill. All right, so now we're in Claude Cowork, so let's start building a skill together. The skill that we're gonna build is a very common sales workflow, which is essentially taking a company that you know nothing about and researching that company and building an account brief so that when you cold call them or cold email them, you have a point of view on why that company should buy from you and also why they should buy from you now versus 6 months from now. So it's a very common sales workflow. And so let's talk about how we can package that into a skill. And I know I actually demoed my outbound full skill in an earlier video in this course, but in this one, I really want to show like what are the reference files I use to actually package that together, so you can do that for your business. Now, the first thing I want to call out is if we actually go into Customize, Anthropic actually gives you out of the box a skill creator skill, and I highly recommend that you use this whenever it comes time to creating any skills for your common workflows. And the reason I like creating it using the skill creator skill is one of the most important aspects of a skill is being able to evaluate it. So what I mean by evaluating it is this skill that you have created better than you just prompting Claude with no context? And so it's really important to run an evaluation. And out of the box, this skill creator skill creates an evaluation viewer. This is basically like a static website to be able to compare an A/B test on the fly as you build the skill together with Claude. And so we're going to use this skill that Anthropic gives you, and I'll show you what the evaluation looks like as we build out the skill. Now, the second thing that we want to do before we start actually creating the skill is we want to have any reference files that we would want to include as part of the skill. So the best mental model to have here is think of building a skill the same way you would be if you are onboarding a new employee. And so what I mean by that is if you have a new SDR or a new sales rep that is onboarding to your company and you're teaching them how to research a company or a prospect, you might make sure that they're trained on your ICP and what pain points you solve for. You might also train them up on what signals to look for to say that, hey, this company might have a compelling event for them to buy your product or service now, and this is a good account for us to reach out to now versus 6 months from now. All of those files and all those assets that you probably already have internally to help new employees onboard, you can take those same files and give them to Claude as reference files as you package the skill together. So think about Claude as another employee on your team, and it needs this information to be able to execute these workflows. So for this particular example, let's use the skill creator skill and say, I want to build a skill that researches companies and creates an account brief. This account brief tells me why that company is worth reaching out to and why they would buy my service now. I have a reference file on my ICP and how I want the output of the report. Cool. So we're going to kick this off. Claude's going to ask you some clarifying questions on what exactly I'm looking for. There is also a very high chance that it might say that I already have this skill because I do have the outbound full skill running. So Claude probably knows that there's maybe a skill that's in conflict. But let's first give it a sec to read the skill file, which is what it's doing here. And then from there, let's see what it does next in order to, oh, here it is. It actually says there's an outbound full skill that does research qualification contacts. So I want to make sure the skill is meaningfully different. Let's see here. So let's call just a brief. We will get this as a HTML report and then web search only. So I guess the difference of this is we're not going to be finding contacts. We're just going to be focused on this. And so let's let Claude run this for a sec and see what its initial output looks like, because it's probably going to give us an output and then have us evaluate that output compared to a control group. All right, so Claude just created the first draft of our skill folder. It has a skill.md file. It actually pulled the reference files from the outbound full skill, so both my ICP tiering MD and the assets on the style of the HTML report I'm looking for. And then it gave us these 3 test cases on running the skill. You know, each test case runs with the skill and without the skill. So the idea of the test cases is, imagine we're trying to research Century and we use this skill to research Century, and then we don't use this skill to research Century. And what we're gonna be able to do as the kind of user of this is Claude is gonna run all 6 of these use cases, or all 6 of these runs, and then we're gonna give feedback on what the output was, so that Claude can continue to optimize and make sure that the output that it's giving us is as high quality as possible. So what I'm gonna say is proceed with the 3 runs. And so what it's gonna happen is, okay, so it's kicking off all 6 runs in parallel. And then from there, it's gonna give us a reviewer where we can actually give our feedback back to Claude on the output from all these different, on running this with the skill and running it without the skill. All right, Claude just finished running 6 subagents to be able to run all 3 of these account research tasks in parallel. And so what exactly happened is Claude reviewed, trigger.dev one time with the skill and one time without the skill, and it created an HTML report with and without the skill for us to compare and provide feedback. And it did it for all 3 of these companies. And then it created this reviewer HTML page for us to submit our feedback. So if we actually pull this up on my Google Chrome, this is what the actual eval reviewer will look like. At the very top, this is the prompt that Claude gave to itself, essentially, and it is using the skill file. And then it generated this HTML report. And then from here at the very bottom, you can provide feedback on how the output looked, what you liked, what you didn't like. And then here it also shows the benchmarks for the different skills. So with the skill, what the pass rate was, without it, this is what it was, like what time it took, how many tokens it took. Here's the delta. And then from here, it kind of breaks down a little bit more on the different evaluations. So let's actually take a look at one of these. So let me download this, see if I can pull it up. So here is the first report for the trigger.dev. This is using the skill file. Goes to the section, tier 1 bullseye, passed the disqualifier check, gave us the company research brief, different things on what they do, OSS paid. It's pulling the ICP criteria from the outbound full skill. So that is the ICP for my company. So it's going through this, and it gave us some good, it also did give us some sources. So let me actually do this. So we can actually go to the next one where it ran this exact same workflow without a skill. And let's actually look at what it gave us so we can compare and contrast. So here is this same workflow done without a skill. It says, yes, reach out. I'll go to the back here, verdict.
Yes, reach out. Gives some information on the company, some on the founders, why they buy now. So, yep, fresh funding, product in a very competitive market, fit for Aki sales. Now let's actually go back to here and compare it. So, okay, it's a little bit more in depth in this one. This is talking about commercializing open source. Both have technical buyers. Ease of landing, recently funded. Okay, so somewhat similar. And then buyer's world, motion today, compete for developer trust. I think here is a little bit more in depth on pain to AccuSales capability. So it's mapping pain back to my features. And then it does do this, which is actually give us some information on who to reach out to the company. So it is giving us all this information. So what we can do now from here is say, this is great. I especially, liked the pain mapped to AccuSales capabilities. So we can do this. We don't have to hit submit yet. We're going to go to the next one and say, not enough information on what challenges might be occurring with their sales strategy. So there's going to be quite a few of these, so I'm not going to go through every single one, but what I'm going to show next is how you're actually going to take this feedback. So once we go through all 6 of these, what we can do is we can hit submit all reviews, and what that's going to do is create this JSON object here that has all of our feedback. And so what we can do now is we can go back to Claude, and from here we can upload the feedback that we just downloaded. Let me see if I can find it. Here it is. And so here is the feedback for trigger.dev. I didn't want to give feedback for the rest of the other 2. And so let's have it, take that feedback that we gave it to understand how we can continue to optimize the skill. And you can obviously give more feedback here to say hey, this was good, but improve here. And so from here, let's give Claude a second and see how it, what it outputs next. Okay, so now that we've given Claude the feedback after our evaluation run, Claude has packaged everything together into a skill file. And so here, if you look here, this is the main skill.md. This is kind of the heart of the skill. And then within that skill folder, there is an assets subfolder. And then this is the template for what the report should generate. And there's also a reference folder as well with the ICP tiering criteria. So from here, we can actually just save the skill. And so if we go back to this, we'll see up here at the very top, the skill that we just created. Now, from here, what we can do is we can go back to customize. We can go to this brief. And then from here, if we go to these 3 little icons, we can either edit the skill, we can replace it, or if you want to share it with your team, it's super easy. All you have to do is hit download. And from here, it's going to download a .skill file. And this packages both the skill.md and all the accompanying reference files together. And so you can take that and then you can download it to your desktop. And next, when anyone else is wanting to use a skill, they can come here. Let's say you share that skill with another team, you can come to add, and then you just hit upload skill. And from here, you can just put the exact same account brief skill here. Obviously, this is going to be a conflict since there's one that exists, but it's that easy in order to create a skill, package it up, and then share it with your broader team as well. So we've been able to see kind of an end-to-end workflow with creating a skill, seeing if it's actually better than the baseline, packaging it up all together, and then from there being able to share it with your team. And this took end-to-end about 10 minutes or so. While I'm probably cutting in between waiting for Claude, but in reality it took about 10, maybe 15 minutes to be able to package this. And now any Monday morning, if you're looking at reaching out to 5 to 10 companies, we can just run this skill on a list of companies and generate all these very highly detailed account briefs. And also skills aren't static, right? At any given point, if I do want to come back here and say, I want to edit this with Claude, right? You can work with Claude to optimize it because it's no longer meeting your requirements. Or if you just want to get rid of it, you can as well. But this is a core fundamental piece of how to work with these AI agents, especially Claude Cowork, where you don't have to repeat yourself and you can just get much higher quality outputs by using these skills. All right, guys, so that concludes the 7th and final video on how to use Claude Cowork for sales. I hope you found this entire series super valuable. Skills are an extremely powerful kind of capability that you should take full advantage of. And the best part about skills, which I didn't really call out in the video, is the fact that if you create a skill within Claude, you can use it in other coding agents as well. So you can use it in Codex, you can use it with Gemini. So skills are an open format. So whenever another company comes out with the next best model, you don't have to recreate the skill from scratch. You can just copy and paste it into that other coding agent and start executing that workflow again with higher levels of intelligence. Like always, if you do have any questions, please put them in the comments below. It's super helpful for me as I start building out more content on YouTube. I'm super interested in obviously how AI is impacting sales and go-to-market. And I feel like Claude and Claude Cowork is such a huge productivity unlock for a lot of sales teams, especially mine. So just want to share exactly how we're using it to just make our sales reps way more efficient with being able to generate revenue for us. Lastly, I do post weekly on this YouTube channel. So if you like this kind of content, subscribe to the YouTube channel. It helps me out a ton. And I'll see you guys next week in the next video. See y'all.